The first time someone called me crazy, it wasn't a stranger. It was my husband. We were sitting at the kitchen table that morning, the sunlight coming in softly through the window, the coffee still warm in my hands. Everything looked normal, peaceful, ordinary. Until he sighed, leaned back in his chair, and said it casually, almost gently. "You're imagining things again." I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked. He smiled, the same smile he used whenever he wanted to look patient and reasonable. "That's what you do," he said. "You overthink, you connect things that aren't there." I remember laughing nervously, trying to brush it off. "Daniel, I literally saw the messages." He shook his head slowly, like a disappointed teacher. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about." That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. After that day, the word followed me everywhere. Crazy. If I asked why he came home late, I was paranoid. If I questioned money missing from our account, I was unstable. If I noticed his stories didn't match, I was imagining things. And he didn't just say it to me. He said it to everyone. At first I didn't know. I only felt it. The way conversations stopped when I walked into a room. The way his sister would look at me with concern instead of warmth. The way his mother started speaking slowly to me, like I might not understand. One afternoon, I overheard her whispering to him in the hallway. "She's not well, Daniel, I can see it." He replied quietly, but not quietly enough. "I know, I'm trying to be patient." Patient. As if he were dealing with a problem. As if I were the problem. That night, I cried in the bathroom with the shower running so he wouldn't hear. Not because I was angry. Because I was starting to doubt myself. Gaslighting doesn't feel like abuse at first. It feels like confusion. You replay conversations in your head. You question your memory. You start writing things down just to make sure they happened. I did that. I started keeping notes on my phone. Dates. Times. Exact words. Not to prove him wrong, but to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. Still, every time I tried to confront him, he stayed calm, too calm. "Maria," he'd say softly, "this is what I'm worried about." Worried. That word made everyone take his side. The real damage happened when he took it outside our home. One evening, I ran into an old friend at the grocery store. We chatted for a bit, and before leaving she hesitated, then said quietly, "I hope you're okay." I frowned. Why wouldn't I be? She looked uncomfortable. "Daniel said you've been struggling lately." My chest tightened. Struggling how? She didn't answer, she didn't need to. I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I confronted him that night, he didn't deny it. "I was just being honest," he said. "People should know what I'm dealing with." Dealing with. Like I was a burden. That night, something inside me hardened. Not into anger. Into awareness. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I found a pamphlet in his briefcase. A mental health clinic. Highlighted sections. Notes in the margins. My name written at the top. I sat on the edge of the bed holding it, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When he walked in and saw it in my hands, his face didn't panic. It relaxed. "We need help," he said calmly, "and I'm doing this for you." That's when I understood. This wasn't concern. This was a plan. And if I didn't do something soon, he wasn't just going to call me crazy. He was going to make everyone believe it. After that night, I stopped reacting. At least that's what it looked like on the outside. Inside, my mind was racing. Daniel became attentive. Too attentive. He started asking where I was going, who I'd talked to, what I'd eaten, whether I'd slept well. He'd say it with a soft voice, with concern written carefully across his face, like a man playing a role he'd practiced many times. "You've been forgetting things lately. he told me one morning while pouring coffee. I haven't, I said quietly. He smiled. See, you don't even notice when it happens. That smile stayed with me all day. The next week the pressure increased. Small things at first. He'd move my keys and then watch me search for them. He'd deny conversations we'd had the night before. He insist he'd already told me something, important things when he hadn't. And every time I questioned it, he'd tilt his head slightly and say the same sentence. Maria, this is exactly what I'm worried about. Worried. That word wrapped everything he did in innocence. His family became part of it. His mother started calling more often, asking how I was feeling. His sister sent me articles about stress and burnout. One afternoon, during a family dinner, Daniel reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. Let's not overwhelm her, he said gently when the conversation got lively. She gets anxious. Everyone nodded. No one looked at me. I sat there smiling politely, my heart hammering against my ribs. I wanted to scream that I wasn't anxious, that I wasn't fragile, that I was sitting right there, fully aware of what was happening. But I said nothing, because I was starting to understand something important. If I reacted, he'd win. That night I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My eyes looked tired. Not crazy. Just tired. I whispered to myself, you know who you are. And for the first time in weeks I believed it. I began to pay attention, not emotionally but strategically. I noticed how Daniel always kept his voice calm in front of others. How he saved his irritation for private moments. How careful he was with his words when witnesses were around. He wasn't impulsive. He was methodical. And methodical people always leave patterns. A few days later, I overheard him on the phone in the living room. I'm doing everything they suggested, he said quietly. A pause. Yes, documentation, consistency. My stomach dropped. Documentation. That word told me everything. He wasn't just talking. He was preparing. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay beside him, listening to his steady breathing, realizing something terrifying. He wasn't angry at me. He wasn't out of control. He was calm. And calm people who want to destroy you are the most dangerous of all. The next morning I made a decision. If Daniel was documenting me, I would document him. I ordered a small hidden camera online. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just something to see what he did when he thought no one was watching. I didn't know yet what I'd find. But I knew one thing for sure. The truth was there. And soon it wouldn't just live in my memory. It would live on record. The camera arrived 2 days later. It was small. So small it fit in the palm of my hand. I sat on the edge of the bed, turning it over slowly, my heart beating faster with every second. This tiny thing felt heavier than it should have, like it was carrying the truth I'd been afraid to face. That night while Daniel was in the shower, I installed it in the living room. Not hidden behind something dramatic. Not pointed at the door. Just enough to capture the couch, the coffee table, and the space where he always sat with his laptop. Where he always made his calls. I tested it once. The red light blinked. Recording. I felt sick. Not because I was spying, but because a part of me still hoped I wouldn't find anything at all. For the first day, nothing happened. Daniel came home, kissed my forehead, asked how my day was. He cooked dinner and joked like everything was normal. Too normal. That night, I watched the footage alone in the bathroom with my headphones on. Just silence. Just routine. I almost laughed at myself. Maybe I was wrong. The second day changed everything. Daniel came home earlier than usual. He didn't greet me. Didn't ask about my day. He went straight to the living room and sat down. A minute later, his phone rang. I was in the kitchen, close enough to hear his voice, but not the words. I held my breath. That night, after he fell asleep, I watched the footage. My hands were shaking as I pressed play. On the screen, Daniel leaned back on the couch, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was calm, familiar. But his words... "I need this documented properly," he said. A pause. "No, she doesn't know yet." My chest tightened. "I've been patient," he continued. "I've done everything right." Everything right. I watched as he nodded slowly, listening. "Yes, exactly. That's why it has to look organic." Another pause. "She can't suspect it's intentional." Intentional. I felt dizzy. This wasn't concern. This wasn't fear. This was strategy. He stood up mid-call and began packing. "I just need one more incident," he said quietly. "Something emotional, something they can't ignore." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. He stopped packing. "I know," he said, "I'll handle it." The call ended. Daniel sat there for a moment, staring at nothing. Then he smiled. Not the gentle smile he showed everyone else. This one was cold. Satisfied. I replayed the footage 3 times. Each time hopping I'd misheard something. Each time realizing I hadn't. My husband wasn't worried about me. He was engineering me. The next morning I woke up early. I looked at him sleeping beside me and felt something snap inside my chest. Not love. Not anger. Detachment. The moment you see someone clearly, you can never unsee them again. That day he pushed. Subtly. He asked questions designed to frustrate me. Corrected me in front of others. Rearranged things and then blamed me for losing them. I didn't react. I nodded. I apologized. And I let the camera watch everything. That evening his sister came over. I stayed quiet while they talked in the living room. Later I watched the recording. "She's getting worse," Daniel told her. "She forgets things, she gets defensive." His sister frowned. "Are you sure?" "I live with her," he replied smoothly. "I see it every day." I sat on the bed, staring at the screen. This wasn't just him anymore. This was a narrative. That night I didn't cry. I organized. I labeled files. I backed up recordings. I started a timeline. Because now I understood something important. Daniel wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to erase me. And he had no idea. I was already collecting the proof that would destroy him. After that night the house felt different. Not louder. Not colder. Smaller. Like the walls were closing in, listening, waiting. Daniel changed his approach. He stopped pushing openly and started performing. In public he became the perfect husband. He held doors open for me. Spoke gently. Touched my arm like he was grounding me. "Maria been under a lot of stress," he'd say with a soft smile. "She's trying her best." People nodded sympathetically. And every nod felt like a brick added to the cage he was building around me. At home the mask slipped. Not fully. Just enough. He started keeping a notebook on his desk. Black cover. Always closed when I entered the room. One night when he stepped out to take a call, I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at it. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The camera had already seen him writing in it. Dates. Times. Short sentences. Observations. 2 days later, he suggested something casually over dinner. "Maybe you should take some time off work," he said. "You've seemed overwhelmed." "I'm fine," I replied evenly. He sighed like a man carrying a burden. "That's what scares me, you don't see it." I felt the familiar urge to argue rise in my chest. I swallowed it. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. His eyes flickered. That was the reaction he wanted. The next morning, he drove me to work without asking. I thought it'd help, he said. You've been forgetting things lately. I hadn't. But I thanked him anyway. That night I watched the footage again. Daniel on the couch. Phone in hand. She agreed to time off, he said to someone. Yes, that's progress. Progress. Like I was a case study. The following week he escalated. He scheduled appointments without telling me. Left brochures on the counter. Mentioned options in passing. One evening he said it directly. If you won't go voluntarily, I may have to make some calls. My heart pounded. What kind of calls? I asked softly. He looked at me for a long moment. The calm slipped. Just a little. Calls to people who can help, he said, before things get worse. There it was. The threat. Wrapped in concern. That night I locked myself in the bathroom and pressed my forehead against the mirror. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was alert. Because now I could see the pattern clearly. Step 1, isolate. Step 2, document. Step 3, push until reaction. Step 4, present himself as the solution. He was waiting for me to break. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. The next day, something unexpected happened. His mother showed up unannounced. She hugged me tightly, too tightly. We're worried about you, she said into my hair. I smiled politely. We, I asked. She pulled back and looked at me carefully. Daniel been under so much pressure, she said. He loves you so much. I nodded. He's told me. She patted my hand. Maybe it's time to let him take the lead for a while. I felt a chill run through me. This wasn't concern. This was coordination. That night Daniel poured me a glass of wine. Just to relax, he said. I watched him carefully. I didn't drink it. Later, when I reviewed the footage, I saw him staring at the glass long after I left the room. Thinking. Calculating. I sat on the bed with my laptop open, surrounded by files, recordings, notes. For the first time I saw the full picture. Not just what he was doing, but how close he was to succeeding. If I waited too long, if I slipped once, he would win, and no one would question it. I closed the laptop slowly. Tomorrow, I decided, things would change. Because Daniel thought he was the only one planning. He was wrong. Very, very wronged. The next morning, I left the house before Daniel woke up. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. For the first time in weeks, I did something without explaining myself. And it felt powerful. I drove across town to a small cafe I'd never been to before. It was quiet, almost empty. I chose a corner table where no one could overhear me and ordered coffee I barely touched. Then I made the calls. My hands shook as the phone rang. When she answered, her voice was calm, professional. This is Laura, she said. I was told you could help me, I replied quietly. My husband is trying to convince everyone I'm mentally unstable. There was a pause. Then she said very gently, You're not the first woman to say those words. Something inside my chest loosened. Laura listened without interrupting. I told her everything. The comments, the notebook, the recordings, the pressure, the way everyone believed him because he sounded so reasonable. When I finished, she didn't rush to reassure me. She asked one question instead. Do you feel safe? I thought about Daniel's calm voice. The wine glass. The word progress. No, I said honestly, not anymore. We met that afternoon. Her office was small, neutral, intentionally calming. No harsh lights, no judgment in her eyes. She watched some of the recordings in silence. When Daniel's voice filled the room, calm, confident, calculating, Laura's jaw tightened. "This is coercive control," she said finally. "And this," she gestured to the screen, "is documentation of intent." Intent. That word mattered. She explained things carefully, slowly. That what Daniel was doing wasn't concern, it was preparation. That his calm demeanor worked in his favor until proof existed. That timing was critical. "If he files first," she said, "you're on the defensive. If you file first, he has to explain himself." I swallowed. "What do I need to do?" She leaned forward. "You need to protect yourself before he escalates further." By the time I left her office, my phone had 3 missed calls from Daniel. I didn't answer. Instead, I went somewhere else. A lawyer's office. Not dramatic. Not urgent-looking. Just quiet competence. The lawyer was an older woman with sharp eyes and a voice that didn't waver. She listened. She watched the recordings. She asked precise questions. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "He's laying groundwork for an involuntary evaluation." I nodded, "I know." She nodded back, "Good, because that means you're ahead of him." She explained my options. Documentation. Preemptive statements. Voluntary evaluations. Most importantly, she said, do not confront him yet. I laughed weakly. I wasn't planning to. When I finally returned home that evening, Daniel was packing the living room. "Where were you?" he demanded. I paused. Not to think. To choose. "I needed space," I said calmly. His expression shifted just slightly. "That's not like you," he said. I shrugged. People change. That night he didn't pretend anymore. "You've been distant," he said, sitting across from me. "You've been secretive." I met his eyes. "Maybe I've just been listening." His jaw tightened. "To what?" he asked sharply. "Myself," I replied. Later, when he thought I was asleep, he made another call. I watched it the next day on the camera. "She's pulling away," he said. "No, she hasn't broken yet." A pause. "I may need to move faster." My hands went cold. I backed everything up again. Cloud. External drive. Emails. Because now I knew. The moment he realized, he was losing control. He wouldn't stop. And whatever came next would decide everything. From that moment on, I stopped pretending everything was normal. Not in a way anyone could accuse me of. Not loudly. Not emotionally. I became careful. Daniel noticed. He always did. He started watching me the way you watch something you're afraid of losing control over, quietly, closely, calculating every move. "You've been very calm lately," he said one morning as we ate breakfast. "Is that a problem?" I asked. He hesitated. "No," he replied, "it's just different." Different scared him. That afternoon, he made his move. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He invited me to talk. "We need help," he said gently, sitting across from me. "Together." I stayed silent. "I scheduled an appointment," he continued. "Just a consultation for you." "For me," I repeated. "Yes," he said, nodding, "to make sure everything's okay." I looked at him for a long moment. "And if I don't go?" I asked. His voice stayed calm. "Then I'll have to take responsibility," he said, "as your husband." There it was. The line he'd been practicing. That night I slept lightly. At 2:11 a.m. his phone buzzed. He answered it quietly and stepped into the hallway. He didn't close the door completely. I didn't move. "She's not cooperating," he whispered. A pause. "No, she doesn't know yet." My heart pounded. I'll file tomorrow if I have to, he said. Yes, emergency. Emergency. The word echoed in my head long after he returned to bed. The next morning I didn't panic. I acted. I went straight to the lawyer's office. She was already expecting me. He's escalating, I said. She nodded, then we act first. Within an hour, a formal statement was filed. My voluntary evaluation was scheduled. Protective documentation was submitted. And most importantly, everything was time-stamped. He can't file without scrutiny now, she said. If he tries, he'll have to explain himself. I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. When I returned home, Daniel was waiting. He stood in the kitchen, arms crossed. I went by the clinic today, he said carefully. They said they haven't heard from you. I know, I replied calmly. His eyes narrowed. That's concerning, he said. Avoidance is a sign. I smiled slightly. So is manipulation. His face changed. Just for a second. Then he laughed. You're twisting things again. I reached into my bag and placed my phone on the table. I recorded your call last night, I said quietly. The color drained from his face. You what? You said you'd file an emergency petition, I continued. You said it on the phone, at 2:11 a.m. Silence. Pure, naked silence. You shouldn't be spying on your husband, he said finally. I shouldn't have to, I replied. He stood up abruptly. This is exactly the behavior I've been talking about. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just pressed a button. His voice filled the room. Clear, calm, calculated. I'll file tomorrow if I have to. He stared at the phone like it was a loaded weapon. For the first time, Daniel looked unsure. Not angry. Afraid. You think this changes anything? He asked. It changes everything, I said. He turned away without another word. That night he didn't come to bed. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing one thing for certain. The mask had slipped. And now he knew. I wasn't confused. I wasn't broken. I wasn't powerless. I was prepared. The house felt unfamiliar after that night. Not because anything had moved, but because the balance of power had. Daniel barely spoke to me the next morning. He made coffee without offering me a cup. He checked his phone constantly. He avoided eye contact the way people do when they know they've been caught, but haven't yet decided whether to deny or attack. I let him. I had learned something important over the past weeks. People who manipulate don't panic when confronted. They test. They wait. They probe. They look for weakness. So I gave him none. For 3 days nothing happened. No arguments. No threats. No concerned speeches. Just silence. It was the kind of silence that hums under your skin, makes your nerves itch. The kind that tells you something is coming, but not when. On the 4th day, he changed tactics. Let's have dinner with my parents, Daniel said casually while scrolling through his phone. Why? I asked. He shrugged. It might be good for you, being around family. For you. The phrase made my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice neutral. Sure, I said. His eyes flicked up, surprised. Really? Yes, I replied. I think it's time. He smiled then. Not warmly. Relieved. He thought this meant I was backing down. His parents' house smelled like roasted chicken and polish, clean, controlled, staged. The table was already set when we arrived. Candles lit like this was a celebration rather than an ambush. His mother hugged me tightly. You look better, she said, calmer. I smiled politely. Thank you. His father barely acknowledged me, too busy pouring wine. Daniel squeezed my shoulder as we sat down. I let him. Dinner started harmlessly. Work updates. Weather complaints. Small talk. Then, right on cue, his mother leaned forward. Daniel tells us you've been struggling, she said gently. There it was. I put my fork down slowly. I've been dealing with stress, I replied, like many people. Daniel nodded gravely. She doesn't always recognize when she needs help, he said. I looked at him. Calmly. And sometimes, I said, people confuse control with concern. The room went quiet. His father frowned. His mother stiffened. Daniel laughed lightly. See, he said, this is what I mean, she takes things personally. I turned to his parents. May I ask you something, I said. They hesitated, then nodded. Has Daniel ever told you that I forget conversations? I asked. His mother answered immediately, yes. That I imagine things. Yes. That I'm unstable. A pause, then in his own way. I nodded. And did he ever tell you, I continued evenly, that he records his own calls discussing how to document me? Daniel stiffened. What are you doing? He snapped. I ignored him. Did he ever tell you, I asked, that he planned to file an emergency petition if I did cooperate? His father looked sharply at Daniel. What is she talking about? Daniel stood up. This is exactly why. I stood too. Why you tell everyone I'm crazy, I finished. Silence crashed over the table. Daniel's mother spoke first. Maria, sit down. No, I said, I've sat down long enough. I took out my phone. Daniel's eyes widened. Don't, he hissed. I pressed play. His voice filled the dining room. Calm. Controlled. Cold. I'll file tomorrow if I have to. Emergency. No one spoke. Not for a long time. His mother's face drained of color. You said you were helping her, she whispered. I am, Daniel snapped. You don't understand. His father cut him off. Enough. Daniel stared at him. Since when do you take her side? Daniel demanded. Since you started talking about your wife like a problem to be solved, his father replied. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. Final. Daniel looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw it, the realization that he was losing the room. We left shortly after. In the car, Daniel didn't speak. Neither did I. When we reached the house, he finally broke. You humiliated me, he said quietly. No, I replied, I told the truth. He laughed bitterly. You think that changes anything? Yes, I said, I know it does. That night he didn't sleep in the house. He packed a bag and left without saying where he was going. I didn't ask. I locked the door behind him and stood there for a long time, listening to the silence settle. The next morning my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. This is Dr. Reynolds, a man said. You've been listed as the subject of a mental health concern. My heart beat steadily. Yes, I said, I expected this. A pause. You don't sound distressed, he said. I'm not, I replied. I'd like to speak with you, he said, voluntarily. I've already scheduled an evaluation, I said, with documentation. Another pause. I see, he said, that would be helpful. We scheduled the appointment. I hung up and smiled. Daniel had tried anyway. And failed. The evaluation took 2 hours. Questions, assessments, conversations. At the end, Dr. Reynolds folded his hands. There is no indication of delusion, instability, or impairment, he said. In fact, he added, you appear unusually grounded for someone under this kind of stress. I nodded. May I ask you something, he said. Of course. Why do you think your husband believed this would work? I thought about Daniel's calm smile, his notebook, his careful words. Because people confuse confidence with credibility, I said. He nodded slowly. 2 days later, Daniel's lawyer contacted mine. He wanted to resolve things quietly. We didn't. Instead, we documented every call, every message, every attempt to rewrite the narrative. A week later, the truth surfaced publicly. Not dramatically, not explosively, just clearly. Daniel's petition was denied. My evaluation was entered into record. His recorded statements were reviewed. The word coercive appeared more than once. Daniel didn't call again. Didn't text. Didn't try. People stopped asking me how I was feeling. They started asking him questions instead. Questions he couldn't answer. One afternoon, I sat alone in the living room, the same room where the camera still quietly blinked red. I unplugged it. I didn't need it anymore. The truth was no longer hidden. And neither was I. The days after the dinner felt unreal. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just exposed. Daniel didn't come back home. At first I expected him to, angry, defensive, ready to argue. But instead there was silence. The kind of silence that comes when someone realizes the ground beneath them has cracked and they're afraid to move. His mother called me once. She didn't apologize. She didn't accuse me either. She only said one sentence before hanging up. I didn't know my son like this. Neither did I. Word spread quickly but quietly. That was the worst part for Daniel. There was no public scene. No shouting matches. No dramatic accusations. Just whispers, questions, side glances. People who used to smile at him with confidence now looked uncertain. People who once spoke to me slowly, carefully, like I might break, now avoided eye contact altogether. Because the story had flipped. And no one likes realizing they were wrong. Daniel finally texted me 3 days later. We need to talk privately. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. My lawyer can be present. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. You're really doing this? I didn't answer. The first official consequence came from a place I didn't expect. Daniel's workplace. Apparently, one of his colleagues had been at his parents' dinner party. Apparently, questions were asked. Apparently, Daniel's concerned husband narrative didn't sound so professional when paired with recordings and legal terminology. He was placed on temporary leave. Just until things are clarified, the email said. Clarified. The same word he had used about me. That afternoon, his sister showed up at my door. She looked nothing like the confident woman who once nodded along as he described my episodes. Her eyes were red. Her voice unsteady. I didn't know, she said. I swear, he told us you were different when we weren't around. I studied her face. You believed him, I said calmly. She nodded. Yes. That was your choice, I replied. She flinched. I just want to understand, she said. Why didn't you say anything sooner? I thought about the weeks I stayed silent. The notes, the recordings, the planning. Because when you speak too early, I said, people call you emotional. When you speak at the right moment, they call it truth. She didn't answer. She just left. The lawyer meetings began after that. Emails, documents, statements. Daniel's tone shifted quickly, from confident to conciliatory. He wanted to resolve things quietly. He wanted to avoid unnecessary damage. Damage. I almost laughed when I read that word. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about his image. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday. No note. No apology. Just signatures and dates. I signed them the same day. Not because I was eager to end things, but because I was done being in a story someone else controlled. The final blow came a week later. Daniel tried to tell his version publicly. A carefully worded post. Vague references to mental health challenges. A plea for privacy. He didn't mention recordings. He didn't mention petitions. He didn't mention control. But the comments didn't go the way he expected. Someone asked a question. Then another. Then another. He deleted the post within an hour. The silence after that was complete. One evening I sat alone in the living room, the lights low, the city humming quietly outside. I realized something then. The hardest part wasn't being called crazy. It was being believed to be crazy. And now that belief was gone. Not because I begged. Not because I explained. But because I stayed calm long enough for the truth to speak for itself. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window. For the first time in months, my thoughts felt clear. Uninterrupted. Free. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Daniel's last attempt came quietly. No anger. No accusations. Just a request. An email from his lawyer landed in my inbox on a Monday morning. He would like to meet privately before the final hearing. He believes there has been a misunderstanding. I read it twice. Misunderstanding. The word felt almost insulting after everything that had happened. I forwarded it to my attorney without comment. Her reply came minutes later. Only with counsel present, and only if you want closure, not explanation. Closure. I thought about that for a long time. In the end, I agreed. The meeting was scheduled in a neutral office downtown. Glass walls. Muted colors. Everything designed to look calm and reasonable. Daniel arrived first. He looked different. Not disheveled. Not broken. Just smaller. Less certain. When I walked in, he stood up instinctively, then sat back down as if remembering himself. Maria, he said softly. I nodded. Daniel. We sat across from each other, with lawyers on both sides. For a moment no one spoke. Then Daniel leaned forward. I never meant for it to go this far, he said. I studied his face. There was no apology there. Just damage control. You planned it, I replied calmly. It went exactly as far as you intended. It just didn't end the way you expected. He exhaled slowly. You don't understand the pressure I was under, he said. Everyone expected me to hold things together. By breaking me, I asked. His jaw tightened. I thought I was helping, he said. That sentence used to confuse me. Now it just sounded empty. The lawyers stepped in after that. Terms, conditions, final details. Daniel agreed to everything quickly. Too quickly. It was the behavior of someone who wanted the process over before more questions were asked. Before more truth surfaced. Before more damage was done. When the meeting ended, he stopped me near the door. I wish you trusted me, he said quietly. I looked at him for a long moment. I did, I replied. That's how you almost won. I walked away before he could respond. The courtroom was nothing like I'd imagined. No drama. No raised voices. Just facts. Records. Statements. The judge reviewed the documents slowly, carefully. He paused once. Looked at Daniel. Then at me. This case reflects a pattern of psychological coercion, he said plainly. Daniel stared at the floor. The judge continued. The court finds no basis for the claims made against the respondent's mental health. Respondent. That was me. Not unstable. Not delusional. Just present. When it was over, Daniel left without looking back. I stayed seated for a moment, breathing in the stillness. My attorney touched my arm gently. "It's done," she said. I nodded. I felt light. Not because I'd won, but because I was free. The changes afterward were subtle. People didn't apologize outright. They just adjusted. Friends who had grown distant started reaching out again. Colleagues stopped asking careful questions and started speaking to me like a normal person. The concern in their voices disappeared, replaced by something closer to respect. One afternoon, weeks later, I ran into Daniel's mother at the grocery store. She looked older, tired. She hesitated before speaking. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. I waited. "I believed my son instead of listening to you," she continued. "That won't happen again." I nodded. "I hope not," I said. She swallowed. "I don't know how he became like this. Neither did I. But I no longer needed to." That evening, I returned to the house one last time. Not to live. To close it. I walked through each room slowly. The living room where the camera once sat. The kitchen where he'd smiled and called me worried. The bedroom where I'd lain awake wondering if I was losing my mind. I never was. I packed the last box and shut the door behind me. Later that night, alone in my new apartment, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city lights flickered below. Life continued. People moved on. And so did I. I thought about how close I'd come to disappearing into someone else's version of me. How easy it would have been to doubt myself just a little longer. How dangerous calm lies can be when they're spoken by someone you love. Daniel lost his marriage, his credibility, his carefully constructed image. I didn't take anything from him. I simply stopped letting him take from me. As I turned off the lights and prepared for sleep, one thought stayed with me. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to collapse to prove pain. And you don't have to convince everyone. You only have to protect the truth long enough for it to stand on its own. The first morning in my new apartment felt unfamiliar in the best possible way. No tension in the air. No careful listening for footsteps. No mental checklist running in the background. Just silence. Real silence. I woke up before the alarm, sunlight spilling softly through the curtains. For a moment I lay there, confused, my body still waiting for the usual rush of anxiety that never came. That was when it hit me. It was over. Not paused. Not temporarily calm. Over. I made coffee slowly, deliberately, like someone relearning how to live inside her own body. The kitchen was small, but it was mine. No memories attached to it. No invisible rules. No quiet judgments. I stood by the window, watching people on the street below, strangers moving through their lives, unaware that mine had just survived something that nearly erased me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not loud pride. Not victorious pride. The quiet kind. The kind that settles deep in your chest and stays. The following weeks were uneventful. That might sound boring, but to me it was a gift. I went to work. I met friends for coffee. I laughed without immediately wondering if it sounded wrong. No one asked how I was really doing anymore. They just talked to me. Like before. One evening, I received an email notification. Daniel's name. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering above the mouse. Part of me expected anger to return, fear, that familiar tightening in my chest. But there was nothing. Just curiosity. I opened it. The message was short. No accusations. No excuses. Just a few lines. I've started therapy. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a reply. I needed to say I understand now why you left. I'm sorry. I read it twice. Then I closed the email. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I didn't owe him closure. I had already given myself that. People often think the end of a story like this comes with fireworks. A final confrontation. A dramatic speech. A perfectly worded last sentence. But that's not how it really ends. It ends quietly. On an ordinary night. When you realize you're no longer waiting for the other person to change. Months passed. Spring arrived without me noticing at first. Trees bloomed outside my window. The city softened. Life kept moving, indifferent to the storm it had once watched me endure. I stopped replaying old conversations in my head. Stopped wondering what I could have said differently. Because I finally understood something that had taken me far too long to learn. You can do everything right, and still be harmed by someone who benefits from your confusion. One afternoon, I ran into a woman at the bookstore. She recognized me before I recognized her. You probably don't remember me, she said hesitantly. I'm a friend of Daniel's sister. I did remember. She used to look at me with concern. Speak slowly. Smile too carefully. I wanted to say something, she continued. After everything came out, I realized how wrong I was. I nodded. I'm glad you see it now, I said. She hesitated. How did you survive it? She asked, the way he made everyone believe. I didn't let her finish. By not trying to convince anyone, I said. I just made sure I knew the truth. Her eyes filled with tears. I wished her well and walked away. Some lessons aren't meant to be explained. That night, I wrote in a journal for the first time since everything ended. Not to document pain, but to mark distance. I wrote about who I had been before the fear, who I had become during it, and who I was now. Stronger but not hardened. Aware but not suspicious. Careful but not afraid. I used to think strength meant enduring everything quietly. I was wrong. Strength is knowing when silence protects you, and when it protects the abuser. I learned the difference too late to avoid the damage, but just in time to stop it from becoming permanent. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about how close I came to losing myself. How easily calm lies slide past people when spoken with confidence. How dangerous it is when someone else defines your reality long enough. But those thoughts don't haunt me anymore. They remind me. The hidden camera is gone now. The files are archived. The lawyers have closed the case. But the lesson stays. Not as fear. As clarity. I don't tell my story often. Not because I'm ashamed, but because it no longer defines me. It's something that happened, not something I am. And that, in the end, is the real victory. On the last night of summer, I stood on my balcony and watched the city lights shimmer below. I breathed in deeply. Slowly. Fully. No one was watching me. No one was narrating my behavior. No one was quietly collecting evidence. I belonged to myself again. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. When someone tries to convince the world you're crazy, they're usually terrified you'll be believed. So trust yourself early. Document quietly. And never confuse love with control. Because the moment you stop explaining who you are, the truth has room to speak.